Hey, and we're back with this loop box build from before where we last left off. We're talking about laying out the little box here with where you want everything. As you can see, I've used what we were talking about before, the precision square and our ruler to kind of lay out precisely where we want everything. And using these kinds of tools, make sure that everything lines up square with the box, and that's really the key to getting something looking really good. So if everything's kind of in line, equidistant, and square to the actual enclosure, I think you'll find that that really makes a difference in the appearance of the box. And everybody wants their stuff to look good. You don't want it to be, a big mess of, wavy lines and things here and things there. It's not a great idea. So as you can see, I've laid out a grid for where I want everything to go, and selected the spacing. For instance, we'll have a switch here followed by the LED right here, and 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, making sure that there's plenty of room over there. On this side is where we're going to have the jacks for each loop, again using these little lumber guys. Every time I hear that name. So anyway, the way I like to select things as to how they're spaced together is I like to conserve space. So nest things. And the way I'll do that is basically take the two, sort of place them together, use my ruler and see how much space there really is between the two centers. And then give a little bit more for, just a little bit of caution, a little extra space. And I find 3/4 on these works pretty good. So I've laid these out. As you can see, a 3/4 inch between the jacks. They'll be mounted vertically, one on top of the other. So we got 1 set, 2 set, 3 sets, 4 sets, 5 sets. Now the other thing that I've placed here is I actually wanted to make a bit of a DC breakout box. Now a breakout box is something that basically takes a line in, whether it be a AC signal like your guitar signal or a DC sort of supply, and then splits it off into multiple outputs. So you got one in and let's say 3, 4, 5, however many out you need. And in my case, the pedals that I'm running are vintage pedals for the most part, and they don't require a lot of current. And the power supply I'm using, the 18 volt particularly, has a fairly good current supply, so I can power several pedals off of a single output on my power supply. So what these are here for is basically DC jacks, using the 2.1 millimeter DC jacks, and I'll have a couple here. And I've mated that with the board to see that there's space here for the jacks to go, and that they made up with channels, and that there's nothing interfering there. So we'll have 2 broken out here, and we'll have on the end here 2 broken out. One of these will be the in, which will supply all of the LEDs that will illuminate which particular loop is active, and then 1 from here will be a breakout, and 2 from here will breakout. So we basically have 1 in, 3 out on the DC, and that'll really help me with the wiring. As most of these power supplies, Pedalboard power supplies, they don't give you a whole lot of 18 volt outputs. So having a breakout on something like this, it really facilitates the board construction. So next thing I wanted to show you is sort of like, if you haven't done this before, there's plenty of guys out there who have, and this is not really going to be something new for them. But I'll show you sort of the tools and the way that I would go about getting the holes drilled and getting them drilled neatly. So I go back to using this little guy right here. I affectionately call it the pokey tool, and it's just a scribe. This one I got from Stuart Mac. And I'll use basically 3 drill bits. So I'm going to use a 16th inch drill bit here that's loaded, chucked into my drill for the initial pilot hole. Then I'll open it up with an 1/8 inch. And then this is kind of what I wanted to show guys that may not have done this a lot. This is what's called a unibit. You can get these basically at almost any hardware store or any box hardware store like a Depot or a Lowe's. They're not very expensive. And what they do is they have stepped basically openings. So you can with 1 bit give yourself a whole variety of openings. just by continuing to proceed further down the drill bit itself. So I'll just show you what I like to do real quick here. So right here we're going to have one of our lumber jacks, which is a 3/8. So I'm going to take my pokey tool and I'm just going to pierce the tape. Now that's almost enough. I mean, if you want to, you can use a punch and just follow that out and click it down and make sure you got a nice hole for the bit to grip. But I find with these 16th inch, they don't need a whole lot. So we're just going to place it in there, start drilling. And as you can see, how easy this stuff drills, these aluminum enclosures that Hammond makes. Very simple. So we're going to unchuck the 16th and we're going to put in the 8th. That's the next one. Take the 8th, follow it through. Done. And we're going to unchuck this one and we're going to put in our unibit. And now we're going to count out about 9. So 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Actually, in this case, I believe it was 8. So clear off all the little chips, and we're going to test to make sure that's the right size, and indeed it is. So as you can see, we've got that done. You have a very neat hole there. It's perfectly round. That's one of the great things about the unibit, is it really does make a round hole. If you're going to use something like a straight bit, 3/8 inch straight bit, a lot of times you'll find that the drill will kind of wobble a little bit and you'll end up with an oblong hole, and that's a little bit sloppy. I mean, it's not going to make a big difference, but I like things to be nice and neat. So unibit, big plus for that. And using your scribe to give yourself a little punch in the tape, step it up from 16th to 8th up to the unibit, and then you're pretty much guaranteed making a good hole. So I hope that helps, and the next step is going to be drilling this whole thing out, inserting all the components and doing the wiring. So we'll see you then.